You know, it's funny how much of our lives are spent on trial for crimes no one ever actually accused us of. We defend our choices, our silences, our dreams, as if there's a cosmic courtroom out there keeping score. We replay conversations in our heads, constructing perfect rebuttals to arguments that never happened. Someone raises an eyebrow, and we build a whole defense case. Someone misunderstands us, and we feel compelled to clarify, explain, justify. But have you noticed? The harder you try to make others understand you, the less understood you feel. It's a strange kind of madness, this constant need to prove our innocence to an invisible jury. We call it standing up for ourselves, but half the time what we're really defending is an image, an idea of who we think we should be. We polish it, guard it, fight for it, as though our life depends on it. Yet deep down, a quiet voice whispers, what if none of this is necessary? Imagine for a moment that you are water. You don't argue with the rocks that block your path. You don't form committees about the fairness of gravity. You simply flow around, over, through, and in that effortless movement, you end up shaping mountains without ever lifting a fist. That's the paradox of life most of us miss. The more you defend yourself, the more fragile you become. The more you release the need to defend, the more indestructible you realize you already are. Because the truth is, most of what you think you're defending isn't even you. It's a bundle of opinions, memories, borrowed expectations, a paper mask that disintegrates the moment it's touched by rain. Beneath that mask, there's something vast, unhurt, unbothered by whether the world approves or not. The real you doesn't need defending, it needs remembering. Today, I want to tell you about 5 illusions. We all get trapped in illusions that keep us endlessly defending, explaining, and exhausting ourselves without realizing it. So here's the question that begins it all. When life invites you to lay down your armor, will you dare to step out? Have you ever noticed how easily we become addicted to explaining ourselves? Someone asks why you did something, and suddenly you're performing a small theater production called Here's Why I'm a Good Person. You rearrange your sentences, polish your tone, rehearse your justifications in your mind until they sound acceptable, harmless, safe. It's as if somewhere deep inside, a frightened child still believes that love must be earned through good explanation. I once met a man who could never leave a disagreement unfinished. Every time a friend misunderstood him, he would send long messages to clarify his intentions. Every time someone didn't reply, he'd spiral into anxiety, imagining that silence as a verdict. He told me he was just being honest, but in truth, he was pleading for permission to exist. His words were a shield, his eloquence a disguise for fear. And one day, while telling me about yet another conversation he had set straight, I asked him quietly, "What if you didn't?" He stared at me, confused, as if I'd suggested he stop breathing. Because for him, explaining wasn't communication, it was survival. The need to defend, to justify, to be understood, it all comes from the same illusion, that your worth depends on how others interpret you. That somewhere out there, other people's opinions are the final truth of who you are. It's a kind of inner courtroom where you play every role, judge, jury, witness, and accused. You call it conversation, but really, you're on trial. And no matter how many times you win, you never feel free, because the trial never ends. But here's the strange thing. No one else is actually holding the gavel. The jury is imaginary. The judgment you fear most is your own. Every time you rush to explain, you're trying to convince yourself that you're good enough, smart enough, lovable enough, and the very act of defending proves that you still doubt it. Now imagine something different. Imagine you stop answering the summons. The courtroom goes quiet, the judge looks up, but there's no one in the defendant's chair. No one to cross-examine, no one to prove right or wrong. Just silence, spacious, honest, terrifying at first, and then peaceful. That's what happens when you stop explaining yourself. You step out of the courtroom and back into life. People will still have their opinions, but they'll echo in the empty hall instead of inside your heart. So ask yourself, when you rush to explain, who are you really trying to convince? Them or you? Because once you realize that understanding isn't owed to you, and neither is misunderstanding a threat, something miraculous happens. The world stops being a courtroom and becomes a river again. And you, at last, are free to flow. You see, most of what people throw at you isn't really about you at all. It's their reflection fragments of their own unfinished business landing on whatever surface happens to be near. When someone calls you selfish, what they often mean is, I've forgotten how to take care of myself. When they accuse you of arrogance, it's usually their own quiet insecurity crying out for disguise. We like to think people see us clearly, but most of the time they're only reacting to the mirror we happen to hold up to their unconsciousness. It's strange, isn't it? You could walk into a room and say something perfectly neutral, yet someone will take offense. Another person will admire you for the exact same word. The difference has nothing to do with truth, it's the filter through which they hear it. Each person is listening not to you, but to the echo of their own mind. I once watched a small argument unfold between two co-workers. One accused the other of trying to look superior during a meeting. The second, caught off guard, rushed to defend himself, insisting he meant no harm. I saw the spiral begin: accusation, denial, justification, the usual dance. But when he paused and simply said, maybe you're right, maybe not, the energy shifted. The accusation lost its grip. It was like watching someone drop a rope in a tug of war. The first man blinked, uncertain what to do without resistance. Within minutes, the argument dissolved. Why? Because without a wall to bounce off, his projection had nowhere to stick. Every time you defend yourself, you make someone else's confusion real. You give shape to their shadow. It's like catching a ball that wasn't meant for you and holding it tightly to your chest, wondering why it hurts. But if you let it fall, if you allow their words to pass through you like wind through a tree, the air clears, the noise ends. The mind loves enemies because enemies make the ego feel solid. But awareness knows better. It sees that every attack is really a kind of self-defense, someone protecting their own fragile image by scratching at yours. And when you understand that, compassion replaces combat. You stop taking it personally because you see the person behind the attack, scared, confused, trying to locate themselves in a shifting world. So next time someone throws judgment your way, try something radical. Don't defend, don't explain. Just listen with quiet curiosity. Ask yourself, what are they really saying about themselves? You'll find that most conflicts dissolve not through clever arguments, but through recognition the moment you realize that their words are not about you, but about the weather passing through their sky. And you are the space that remains clear, untouched, reflecting nothing but light. Most of us, without realizing it, spend our lives trying to be walls strong, immovable, unshakable. We brace ourselves against every opinion, every misunderstanding, every gust of criticism that blows our way. We build fortresses out of politeness, sarcasm, intellect, anything to protect the image we've constructed. But have you noticed what happens to a wall over time? It cracks, it erodes. The more it resists, the more it invites the storm to keep testing its strength. Now imagine water instead. Water doesn't resist. It doesn't argue with gravity or complain about the shape of the land. It moves with what is. It flows over, around, through, and in doing so, it transforms everything it touches. Put a rock in its path, and it dances around it. Leave it long enough, and the rock itself begins to change shape. There's a quiet power in that, the kind of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't harden, doesn't need to win. I once knew a teacher who embodied this perfectly. One day, a parent stormed into her classroom, furious over a rumor that she'd treated their child unfairly. Most people would have defended themselves, listing rules, showing evidence, proving innocence. But she didn't. She simply listened, calm and open, letting the storm pass through. When the parent finished, exhausted, she said gently, "I can see how that must have felt. Let's talk about what actually happened." Within minutes, the anger melted. The parent left in tears, not of rage, but of release. She hadn't won the argument, she had dissolved it. That's what happens when you stop being a wall and become water. You stop feeding the illusion of opposition. You begin to sense that most conflicts are not battles to be won, but energies seeking a place to flow. The ego believes that strength means standing your ground. Awareness knows that strength means staying in motion. Think of your own life. How often have you exhausted yourself trying to hold your shape, trying to keep your image intact against the friction of misunderstanding? The wall feels safe, but it's a prison. Water looks soft, but it's freedom itself. So the next time someone pushes against you, instead of pushing back, pause. Let your breath be your tide. Let silence be your current. Let their force pass through without resistance. Because water doesn't lose by yielding, it wins by remaining itself. And perhaps that's the secret all along. Life isn't asking you to be harder. It's asking you to remember your softness. There's a moment so small you can almost miss it, between the sting of an insult and your impulse to defend. That instant, that breath, is the birthplace of freedom. But most of us rush straight past it. We react before we've even felt. Someone challenges our beliefs, questions our motives, touches an old wound, and suddenly we're 10 years old again, fighting to prove we're good, right, worthy. We mistake speed for strength. Yet reaction is not power, it's panic wearing armor. I once saw this play out during a community meeting. A young man stood up to share an idea, and before he could finish, someone interrupted, mocking him in front of everyone. The room went tense, waiting for the explosion. But instead, he paused. He took a slow breath, smiled faintly, and said, "That's an interesting perspective. Can I tell you why I see it differently?" The temperature of the room shifted instantly. What could have become a fight became a conversation. People leaned in. They listened. That's the difference between reaction and response. A reaction is driven by the wound. It's the ego flinching at perceived danger. A response comes from clarity, the awareness that no danger actually exists. When you respond, you're not defending an identity. You're addressing a situation. You're seeing what's true rather than what your fear imagined. Think of an archer. A beginner flings arrows wildly the moment the target appears, hoping that speed will compensate for aim. But the master archer waits, breathes, feels the wind, the weight of the bow, the stillness inside. Then releases from center, not from tension. That's what responding feels like. The arrow flies straighter because it was never fired in fear. Now, this doesn't mean silence is always the answer. Sometimes clarity calls for action, to correct a lie, to protect someone, to speak truth into confusion. But even then, you act from stillness, not from rage. You correct the falsehood, not because your reputation is at stake, but because truth serves the whole. You speak not to prove, but to clarify. You move not to win, but to align with what's real. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop reacting, you often don't need to respond at all. The moment you withdraw your emotional fuel, most fires burn themselves out. The fight collapses without an opponent. So, the next time your pulse rises and words form like arrows on your tongue, pause, breathe, feel the wind. Ask yourself, what does this moment actually need? Not what your pride demands, not what your fear imagines, but what the situation itself is asking for. Because life doesn't need your defense. It only asks for your clarity. And clarity, unlike reaction, never misses the mark. At some point on this path, you begin to notice something quietly astonishing. The more you stop defending yourself, the less there is to defend. The insults still come, misunderstandings still happen, storms still pass through, but they no longer pierce you. They move across your awareness like clouds across a vast blue sky. The sky never apologizes for the weather. It never argues with the thunder or negotiates with the rain. It simply remains wide, open, untouched. You are that sky. You've always been. It's just that for years, you've mistaken yourself for the passing clouds, the identities, the stories, the opinions others project onto you. Someone calls you selfish, another calls you kind, and you rush to agree or resist, as if your being depends on their perception. But all those judgments are just weather patterns. They arise, take shape and dissolve, and the sky remains what it always was, spacious, luminous, unbroken. I remember a friend once told me she had finally stopped arguing with her family about who she should be. She said, "I realize they're not talking to me. They're talking to a version of me they built in their heads." And she laughed, not bitterly, but with genuine relief. That's when it clicked. When someone attacks you, they're never attacking the truth of who you are. They're wrestling with their own imagination of you, a mental puppet performing in their private theater. And if you stop stepping on stage, the play ends. The self that feels wounded is only the costume, the temporary role. Beneath that, you are the awareness that watches the drama unfold, the witness, not the warrior. Once you understand this, defense becomes absurd. It's like trying to protect the ocean from its own waves, or the fire from its own flames. What could possibly threaten what you truly are? And yet, this realization doesn't make you cold. On the contrary, it opens your heart wider. Because when you no longer need to defend your identity, you no longer need to attack anyone else's. You see that everyone is caught in the same forgetting, mistaking the weather for the sky, the shadow for the self. Compassion replaces control. You stop needing to be right, and instead you start being real. So the next time someone throws their storm your way, remember, you don't need to take shelter. You are the shelter. Let the rain fall. Let the thunder roll. Let every passing opinion drift by without resistance. Because the sky never loses to the storm. It simply outlasts it, not through strength, but through vastness. And you, too, are that vastness. So here we are, at the quiet end of all our explanations, our defenses, our exhausting inner trial. If you followed this far, maybe you've begun to sense it too, that peace isn't something you earn by winning arguments or proving your goodness. It's what remains when the need to prove anything disappears. Look back at where we've walked together. You began in the courtroom of explanation, always pleading your own case. Then you saw the mirror of projection, where other people's fears dressed themselves in your name. You learnt to move like water instead of standing like a wall. You discovered the breath between reaction and response, that small space where clarity lived. And finally, you glimpsed the sky, the self that was never touched by any of it. All along, you weren't trying to become stronger. You were remembering that you were never fragile. Every defense you built was only protecting a story, a costume, a dream version of you. The real you, the one that watches, breathes, loves, and lets go, was never in danger. The only thing that ever needed defending was the illusion of separation. And the moment you see through that illusion, you find that life itself has been defending you all along. You don't need to fight for your worth. You don't need to chase understanding. You don't even need to be seen, because what you are, awareness itself, cannot be unseen. It's already whole, already free, already complete. So the next time the impulse rises to explain yourself, to justify, to prove, pause. Feel the space around that urge. Ask yourself, what if I let this go? You'll feel it, that strange lightness, that quiet relief, that soft expansion that comes from finally stepping out of the armor you never needed to wear. Because you are not broken, you are awakening. And awakening isn't about becoming untouchable. It's about realizing you already are, not because the world stopped throwing storms at you, but because you discovered you were the sky all along. So today, choose one place where you can stop defending yourself. Just one. Let that silence be your teacher. Let that stillness remind you of your true strength. The door is open. Step through. And when you do, you'll see it clearly at last. You were never under attack. You were only being invited home.